Death, Scorpio and Our Times. A short set of excerpts from the Tibetan Master, published in the Blue Books by Lucy's Trust.
Before we begin, let us align as soul with all those studying and meditating with Master Zhuang Ku. Enter into this light. In Scorpio, the light of day. This is the place where three lights meet. The light of form, the light of soul, and the light of life. They meet, they blend, they rise.
Into the light we move, beckoned thereto by thee. Out of the dark we come, driven thereto by the soul of all. Up from the earth we spring, and into the ocean of light we plunge. Together we come, together we move, guided and led by the soul we serve, and by thee, the Master we know. The Master within and the Master without are one. That one are we. The one is all. My soul, thy soul, the Master, and the soul of all.
In Scorpio, as a discipleship group, we move out of the dark and into the light. For Scorpio signifies the light of day, the ruling sign of the path of discipleship, and the ruling sign of the fifth creative hierarchy, the solar angelic hierarchy. In the full light of day, we enter into the tests and trials on all levels. With detachment, spiritual courage, wise purpose, compassionate comprehension, and persistence. For we know that for humanity as a whole, there is eventual triumph through death to desire and death to the personality.
In relation to the passing from the physical form. There is no death. There is, as you know, entrance into fuller life. There is freedom from the handicaps of the fleshly vehicle. Death is essentially a matter of consciousness. We are conscious one moment on the physical plane, and a moment later we have withdrawn onto another plane and are actively conscious there. Just as long as our consciousness is identified with the form aspect, death will hold for us its ancient terror. Just as soon as we know ourselves to be souls and find that we are capable of focusing our consciousness or sense of awareness in any form or any plane at will, or in any direction within the form of God, we shall no longer know death.
Let us pause and consider where each of us may be in relation to this matter of consciousness. Have we advanced beyond the ancient terror of physical death? Do we have any real knowledge? Can we see ourselves attaining that point of that higher level of consciousness and a sense of awareness in any form of any plane at will?
The four stages of this death that is essentially a matter of consciousness. Stage 1, by the withdrawal from the dense physical body. Stage 2, by the withdrawal from the etheric body. Stage 3, by a later vacating of the astral body. And stage 4, a final leaving of the mental body.
In following the directions from Patanjali in Light of the Soul, eventually, through meditation, we can begin to experience these points of withdrawal and actually practice the act of moving beyond into greater expansions of consciousness.
All severing of links produces severe reactions. Yet if you could but realize it, the severing of the outer physical plane links is the least severe and the most impermanent of all such events. Death itself is a part of the great illusion and only exists because of the veils which we have gathered around ourselves.
In the midst of the Great World War, Master DK offered these words to his disciples. Such a dying is ever a painful process. Pain has always been the purifying agent employed by the lords of destiny to bring about liberation. The accumulated pain of the present war, which was the second half of the Great War, and the inherited pain of the earlier stage, begun in 1914, is bringing about a salutary and changing world consciousness. The Lord of Pain has descended from his throne and is treading the ways of earth today, bringing distress, agony, and terror to those who cannot interpret his ends, but bringing also a restimulation of the instinct to self-preservation, which in its higher aspect is the instinct to immortality. It tends to focus humanity's attention upon the life aspect and not upon the form. The names of the lords of karma signify symbolically, and from the angle of their inner meaning, relationship, enlightenment, pain, and return. Ponder on this. They are all peculiarly active at this time, and in their activity lies the hope of humanity. We seem to be continuously in this process, with the Lord of Pain descending from his throne and treading the ways of earth yet today, bringing distress, agony, and terror to those who cannot interpret his ends. We look out along the pathways to different nations and their paths. We can see this playing out yet today. And experience this as tests and trials in communities, in nations, and on the world stage. So let us recall Master DK's teachings on the law of abstraction in this context. The abstraction of the blue ray of devotion, this second subray of a subray of the second ray of love wisdom, passing now into the violet ray of the ceremonial ray. Simply, it means that the great musician of the universe is moving the keys, sounding another note, and thus bringing in another turn of the wheel, swinging into the arc of manifestation, the ray of violet, the great note G, and these rays bringing with them in every kingdom in nature all that is attuned to them, all human beings, all devas of order high or low, all elementals, desirable and undesirable, flowers, fruits, and vegetable life of a certain kind, and animals and forms of varying species. It is the passing out of a ray which signals the ultimate extinction of some particular form, some type of animal life, and leads to some vegetable aspect coming to an end. Hence the confusion among the scientists at this time. And we could say, in this time, the confusion among all those who are trying to lead humanity into the coming age, and the impatience of many, because the process is slow. It's all the work of nature, as is this process of passing out. Simultaneously with the cyclic birth and emergence of this new ray is the slow return to its source of the prevailing ray. So the sixth ray, the ray of devotion, passing out, and the ray of ceremonial, magic, order coming in. What is required of us in terms of the law of abstraction?
Master Dwal Kul tells us that we must learn increasingly to work under the influence of the law of abstraction. This is the law which is ever present in the world in relation to the processes of death. The aspect of its importance in connection with physical death is deemed of slight importance in comparison to its emphasis in connection with the world of thought. This can refer to the abstraction of the life principle from the physical body in response to soul command. It can also refer to a cycle of physical plane conditioning or circumstance, to the termination of a relation to a physical plane group, or to the abstraction of an interest regarded hitherto as basic.
Let's pause for a moment, because the potency of this time in Scorpio gives us an opportunity to consider how we are working with this law of abstraction, particularly in connection with the world of thought. As individuals, are we able to abstract from our current condition on the physical plane? Are we able to abstract from the circumstance in which we find ourselves as individuals, as communities, as nations? Are nations able to terminate the relation on the physical plane with a particular group? Abstraction from the thought form of a particular devotion to a group or activity.
This law applies to the termination of an outgoing affection towards a person or a group of persons upon the astral plane. The severing of connection with specific lines of thought. This may refer to the preconceived need which may dawn increasingly upon the disciple as he draws closer to the ashram. It is the law of abstraction which lifts a disciple out of the three worlds of human endeavor. It is this same law which brings about the upward drive which all units of life express, and the search of all of them for identification with the One. It is with this law that you, along with all disciples, must learn to work.
Consider this notion of the termination of an outgoing affection towards a group upon the astral plane. The severing of connection with specific lines of thought. As we move into a closer relationship to the ashrams and the ashram of the master to which we are affiliated, what specific lines of thought must be released? severed.
Death is of three kinds. The science of divine dying underlies the well-known phrase, "The lamb slain from the foundation of the world." And when the relationship between Aries, Scorpio, and Pisces is properly understood as a linking and merging of the three crosses, a new light will be thrown upon all subsidiary sciences, exoteric and esoteric. The teaching in the secret doctrine about the reincarnating monads, who are called the divine sacrifices, lords of knowledge, will and sacrifice, will be clarified. These monads, who are ourselves, are lords of persevering, ceaseless devotion, devotion even unto death.
So the science of dying is threefold, involving Aries, Scorpio, and Pisces, and is related to a much broader, more expansive sacrifice than we could even begin to comprehend. But it is foundational to the understanding of what we experience in terms of physical death and the abstraction from the astral field and from the mental field, to be able to attain the status of soul consciousness and to become as soul the vehicle of the monad being the Lord of persevering, ceaseless devotion. For even expanded points of surrender and release from the lower to the higher.
The death of desire. Death in Scorpio is of a different nature and is also described in the same ancient writing in the following words: Ancient One dies by drowning. Such is the test. The waters envelop him, and there is no escape. He drowns. The fires of passion are then quenched. The life of desire ceases its appeal, and to the bottom of the lake he now descends. Later, he reascends to earth, where the white horse waits his coming. And this he mounts. Sagittarian attitudes, proceeding towards the second death, that is, towards Pisces, with the influences of Pluto.
As we follow the path, we have these little deaths to give us hints related to the greater, to be able to imagine, to vision the fires of passion quenched, the life of desire ceasing all appeal, and yet continuing along the path fueled by the science of aspiration. It is in Scorpio that the prodigal son comes to himself, and having eaten of the husks of life and having exhausted the resources of worldly desire and ambition, he says, I will arise and go to my father. There are two such major crises in the life of the aspirant. The first crisis, the turn from Sagittarius, I see the goal, I reach the goal, and then I see another, to Scorpio, the period of tests and trials on all levels, physical, emotional, and mental. When the intelligent man of the world comes to himself and then reorients himself to the soul, turns on the wheel, reorients the self to the soul and its requirements. This leads to the tests in Scorpio. The second great crisis in Scorpio, through Scorpio, is reorientation to the monad. And this is when, DK tells us in esoteric astrology, the initiate of the third degree, first major initiation, upon a higher turn of the spiral, reorients the self to the monad and passes through most subtle tests to certain undefinable and spiritual recognitions. Upon these, he says, we need not enlarge. This is what brings liberation from the soul vehicle, the causal body, and results in eventually the destruction of the causal body through these most subtle tests. Let us consider humanity, the world disciple, in Scorpio. And sound the second great invocation given in 1940 by the Tibetan master to be used by disciples and initiates. It was originally at that time when the World War was coming to a climax that required the intervention of Shambhala. We are now approaching the great opportunity of this next conclave. So sound together with the Christ and the Masters.
Let the Lords of Liberation issue forth. Let them bring succor to the sons of men. Let the rider from the secret place come forth, and come in safe. Come forth, Almighty One. Let the souls of men awaken to the light, and may they stand with masked intent. Let the fiat of the Lord go forth. The end of woe has come. Come forth, Almighty One. The hour of service of the saving force has now arrived. Let it be spread abroad, Almighty One. Let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. The will to save is here. The love to carry forth the work is widely spread abroad. The active aid of all who know the truth is also here. Come forth, Almighty One, and blend the three. Construct the great defending wall. The rule of evil now must end.
Do we fully realize that the suffering that is going on today is the result of successful evolutionary processes? Are we ready to recognize that when an individual's life cycle has been run and that person has learned the lessons which the experience of any particular life has been intended to teach, that the physical body and the inner form aspects, the sum total of that personality expression, begin to deteriorate, and destructive agencies within the form itself will become active, and eventually death will take place. And the result is the liberation of the indwelling life in order that a new and better form may be built. Are we ready to surrender those things on the physical plane that are deteriorating? Are we able to consciously, with the highest aspiration, allow these deaths to occur that will result in the liberation of the indwelling life so that a new and better form may be built? Master DK says this we perforce accept either blindly or intelligently. We have that choice. And to regard it as natural and an unavoidable process, and normal and inevitable. All of that. And not forget that is what is true of the individual is true of humanity. Cycles of civilization, such as that we call our modern civilization, are analogous to a particular individual human incarnation with its inception, its progress and growth, its useful maturity, and its ensuing deterioration and subsequent death, or the passing away of that form.
That humanity is bringing about this needed change in unnecessary, cruel, and painful ways is indeed true, just as it is true today that human beings, by their wrong thinking, foolish habits of physical living and undesirable emotional attitudes do precipitate a final physical breakdown and eventually death. Nevertheless, for the progress of the soul of the individual and the soul of humanity, death is inevitable, good, and necessary. It is also a practice with which we are all most familiar in our own experience and in watching it in others. But we need to remember that the worst death of all, as far as humanity is concerned, would be if a form of civilization or a body form became static and eternal, if the old order never altered and the old values were never transmuted into higher and better ones. That would be indeed a disaster. We need to bear in mind also that the forces of destruction or death are twofold. First, the rapidly emerging and developing life with its demand for more room for expression and fuller experience, and its spiritual aspiration for change and progress. And secondly, the reactionary forces and the conservative attitudes which adhere to the well-known and the familiar, and which hate the new and untried and the unknown. Both of these produce the great and divine transition from the past into the future, and from the old into the new, from experience into fruition, and then into experience again. The realities are eternal and undying. The forms are ephemeral and temporary. The soul is persistent and deathless. The form is changing and doomed to die. The processes of evolution have in the past and will in the future prove successful in bringing forms to birth, to maturity, and to death. But, and this is the interesting and significant point, humanity is for the first time aware of the process.
This stage of death and of birth, for the two are proceeding simultaneously, can be easily grasped by the esotericist as he studies the World War in its two distinctive periods, 1914 to 1918 and 1939 until 1942. The first stage, if you could see the situation as it truly is, was most definitely the death stage. The second stage in which we now find ourselves is literally the stage of birth. The birth pangs of the new order and of the new civilization through which humanity's sense of life can express itself. The mother dies in order that the child may live. The form is sacrificed to the life. But today, the form aspect, the mother or matter aspect, is dying consciously, and just as consciously the child, the infant civilization, is coming into being. This is the new thing, and it is in this that we are all participating. It is the death of the personality of humanity and the coming in of the soul.
The blood theme and the death theme, the suffering and the dire testing of the disciple, the value of the individual conflict, and the consciousness of the misery of existence are basically due to the combined influences of Scorpio and Mars, which have ruled Christianity for so long and which are only now beginning somewhat to lose their influence. A study of the processes of death as the sign Scorpio conditions them, and the processes of death as we see them working out in the sign of Pisces, would be of very real value. Death through the influences of Pluto and death through the influences of Mars are widely different.
Scorpio brings about eventually the death of the personality, esoterically as well as exoterically. Scorpio is a sign of death and burial in the earth, of descent into the depths in order to be lifted again onto the heights, the mountain top in Capricorn. It is stated in some of the most ancient books that the heat of the earth, the mother, and the sting of the scorpion are the beneficent gifts which the turning of the wheel gives to the man at the beginning and the end. These gifts, when accepted and used, bring a man to liberation and eventually from the control and pain of the fixed cross.
Do we recognize that as the mutable cross is the cross of adaptation, the fixed cross is the cross of pain?
Hierarchical ruler, Mercury. The second death. Purification. But this time, through vision, comes to the developed man through the activity of the subjective ruler of the planet, Mercury, who is the illuminating principle, which releases the mind, directs the way of man through life, and enables him to become aware of the divine plan, which underlies all his fiery experience. Such a dying is ever a painful process. Pain has always been the purifying agent employed by the lords of destiny to bring about liberation. The accumulated pain of the present war and the inherited pain of the earlier stage, begun in 1914, is bringing about a salutary and changing world consciousness. The Lord of Pain has descended from his throne and is treading the ways of earth today, bringing distress, agony, and terror to those who cannot interpret his ends, bringing also a re-stimulation of the instinct to self-preservation, which in its higher aspect is the instinct to immortality. It tends to focus humanity's attention upon the life aspect and not upon the form. The names of the lords of karma signify symbolically and from the angle of their inner meaning: relationship, enlightenment, pain, and return. Ponder on this. They are all peculiarly active at this time, and in their activity lies the hope of humanity.
Vision. Your vision is often distorted by the pain and suffering to which the form is subjected, either your own or that of others, individually or en masse, so that you do not see clearly the purpose and the urgency of the life within the form. To many of you, for instance, the World War was a supreme disaster, an agony to be averted in the future at any cost, a dire and dreadful happening indicative of the wickedness of man and the incredible blind indifference of God. To us, on the inner side, the World War was in the nature of a major surgical operation made in an effort to save the patient's life.
Let us sound together as one group the mantram of the disciples' degree. May the energy of the divine self inspire us and the light of the soul direct. May we be led from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, from death to immortality.
Another surgical operation may be necessary, not in order to destroy and end the present civilization, but in order to dissipate the infection and get rid of the fever. It may not, however, be needed, for a process of dissipation, distribution, and absorption has been going on and may prove effective. Let us work towards that end. But at the same time, let us never forget that it is the life, its purpose, and its directed intentional destiny that is of importance. and also that when a form proves inadequate, or too diseased, or too crippled for the expression of that purpose, it is, from the point of view of the hierarchy, no disaster when that form has to go. Death is not a disaster to be feared. The work of the destroyer is not really cruel or undesirable. I say this to you, who am myself a ponderer of love and know its meaning.
Conclusion. There is little more that I need say, and little else upon which I need, at this stage of study, to comment. The man who is nearing the path of discipleship, or who is already a disciple, pledged or under observation, will profit much from a deep and systematic study of Scorpio.
A statement made by you, the soul, the disciple, to the personality. In the center of the will of God I stand. Naught shall deflect my will from His. I implement that will by love. I turn towards the field of service. I, the triangle divine, work out that will within the square and serve my fellow men.
Ponder on a quality of the soul to embody in this time as we move through Scorpio and recognize that humanity is the world disciple in Scorpio. Let us embody compassionate comprehension.
From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of man, let the plan of love and light work out, and may seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.
savitur perenniam, Pargo devasya dimai, Yo yona prachodayat. Om Bor Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bor Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bor Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bor Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bor Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bor Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yona Prachodayat. Tatsavitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yo Na Prachodayat Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yo Na Prachodayat Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Dhyo Yo